Hi, Jeremy Cordeaux in the Court of Public Opinion. I'm just on air here to let you know that we'll be live streaming the Court of Public Opinion every Friday between 9 o'clock and 12 on jeremycordeaux.com. Please join us. We'd love to have you.
Why don't you write when you don't need money, honey? That would certainly make a hit.
Welcome back to Word Docs. I am your host, Alex Vickery Howe. I am here with Amy T. Matthews and Sean L. Williams. How are we doing?
We're doing good.
Excellent, thanks. All the
Excellent.
better for talking with you guys and seeing you on the screen too. Very exciting.
And we're watching you eat chocolate, which...
Yeah.
So mean. It's just...
Can you hear me?
Tease.
Crunch, crunch. Sorry.
You know,
No,
I'm
sorry,
down
not
to,
sorry.
I'm down to beans and pasta at this end. So this week we are going to talk about critiques and reviews, and I suppose audience or reader feedback. The good, the bad, the
very bad.
the medium, the medium.
The medium.
Well, that's the worst kind of review ever, isn't
was
it? If
the
somebody, we
worst.
talked about this, if somebody says,
Yeah.
oh yeah, that was all right.
That was
That's all
medium.
right. Thanks. That
but
was just 5 years of my life. Thanks.
But it was medium. The worst review is when someone I had a very positive review where someone just went blow by blow through the plot of what I'd written and then said it was good. And I thought, well, no one has to come now. Like, you've just done it. They know exactly what's going to happen. And good, bad, or indifferent, it's out there. It's like the preview for Forrest Gump, which gives away the entire film in about a minute. Like everything, the highs, the lows, the twists, the turns. You don't have to watch Forrest Gump if you've seen the preview for Forrest Gump.
Well, this is the thing about throwing criticisms around. It's we're all in glass houses. We're all artists. How would we feel?
Yeah.
I threw both Twilight and 50 Shades of Grey across the room.
Oh, but they were...
I gave up both.
They were so bad
3
they were
chapters
good.
in.
I kept reading... I read Twilight voraciously because I kept thinking something was going to happen.
I like the plot.
It was a bit like...
and I actually really like the setting.
I like the setting. It's a bit like watching Home and Away or Neighbours, where you stay in there because you think any second now Harold Bishop's going to kill people.
What frustrated me with Twilight is it could have been great if the writing had just had a bit more polish.
Is it the second one where he's obviously a werewolf and she's not getting it? I might have mentioned that before in this podcast. It drives me
the bit
mad.
I couldn't cope with. Why I threw it across the room though was that it was all he sighed, she whimpered, he murmured, she it was just
ejaculated.
Like she couldn't just use a basic speech tag. Just say said, asked, told. That will do. We don't need to be fainting and moaning and...
I just went mad. I went absolutely mad on the guy's obviously a werewolf. You don't have to research this. Just stop and think about it for 5 minutes. It's that thing about being too far ahead of a character. You should sort of alternate between being ahead, being behind. You know, like in a murder mystery.
Yeah, in romance they call it too dumb to live.
Too dumb to live.
Like
brilliant.
Yeah.
This whole podcast has gone into criticising other people's
We
work.
need to be
We're
criticised.
here to talk about how we
Indeed.
deal with criticism from people on the outside. I am now critiquing your performance.
Yeah, we're
podcasters.
We're
How does it
so
make
below
you feel?
medium.
How does it make you feel to be critiqued? Well, obviously it makes you feel terrible.
Well,
Well,
not necessarily, because I think if you're critiqued for what you intended to do and someone takes issue with that, then my attitude is bring it on. I'm always disappointed when you are...
No, don't critique Alex in person.
Well, I'm always disappointed when you're critiqued for something you didn't do, which can happen, especially in theatre. People remember things that never actually happened. Or perhaps the production, which we've discussed previously, a production can misrepresent you. But if someone just genuinely says, I take issue with what you wrote, and they're articulate and they are framing that well with evidence, then I kind of go, yep, sure. I don't love everything. That's fine, but that's what I intended to say.
And personal taste is fine.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think some critics can get very personal. I know Goodreads, like a lot of authors have a rule not to read their Goodreads reviews.
That's me.
Because Yeah, because there's one thing for a critic writing up a review is very thoughtful, but some of those Goodreads reviews are just, they eviscerate you.
Yeah. And I've got a fragile enough self-esteem without reading those evisceratory reviews, and also the overpraising ones aren't helpful either.
Yeah,
I'd rather have a proper review.
I had a dear actor friend, James Aubrey, who was just brilliant, and he said, what's the point of reading a review? If it's a bad one, it's going to depress you, and if it's a good one, it's going to make you a dick.
Can I tell you, I've got an interesting review story though. When End of the Night Girl came out, it got reviewed in the Weekend Australian alongside another book by a male author. Both of us were first novels, debut novels, and mine got critiqued because of the kind of, what did they used to call it? Like that gritty kind of... grunge lit, like the first person kind of 20-something-year-old grunge lit woman's voice, and what does it really matter? It's all very banal. And then praised the male author to the high heavens for a grungy first person,
same reviewer,
early 20s, same reviewer.
Wow.
And didn't see the double standard at all. Like, it was so stark, it really annoyed the hell out of me.
It would annoy me too. And that kind of unfair dismissal enrages me, whether it's directed at me or anybody else. It's so infuriating. But how did you deal with that emotionally, Amy, when you felt like you'd been unfairly criticised? Did you just
that one I could
whatever?
Just roll my eyes. Yeah, I rolled my eyes at that one. I'm trying to think. There probably are some... The ones that infuriated me, I had one once where they were completely wrong. Like, they'd said, oh, she never did this. And it's like, well, yes, I did. That's in chapter whatever.
Yeah.
You clearly either didn't read it or didn't pay attention and skipped past it or skim read it but the criticism I copped in the whole review was completely unfounded. It was a misreading of the book.
I offered to send a critic a published copy of a play I wrote to say, you're wrong. And he, to his credit, wrote back to me, I shouldn't have done it. You shouldn't really engage at all. But
no, that's it.
But I did. And I kind of knew, I think I'd corresponded with this person before, like I'd been interviewed by him, I think. And I said, look, I just want to say the review wasn't actually overall that negative. It was just one comment where I just went, factually, that's untrue, and offered to send him the script. And he said, oh, look, you're probably right, but it's too late now. And I went, oh, okay, fair enough. But that kind of told me that not a lot of effort had been put into that in the first place. But that kind of factual wrongness, I think, annoys me more than a critique. It's like, you can slag me off for what I did, but don't slag me off for what you imagined I did or didn't do.
Yeah. I also had a friend who used to work on magazines reviewing films, and they didn't always see the films.
Oh, man.
They'd watch the trailer and then write the review. And ever since I learned that, I'm like, well, I probably don't take reviews too seriously anymore.
I follow certain critics rather than read certain magazines for that reason. So I find a critic who, it's not that I always agree with their opinion, but I know their process and I know they give honest and informed accounts of their opinions on particular
Well, I got
properties.
very excited last year because I had a book reviewed by Smart Bitches Trashy Books.
Oh, they're the best.
They are amazing, and they've written some really good works of criticism, and they are just really intelligent. And anyway, it was so exciting to get reviewed and to get a good grade.
Did
they loved it. Yeah, loved it, which was great.
Of course they did.
It just, like, it's one of those things where it just turns up out of the blue. You had no idea they were reading it. It was, really cool.
That's a good feeling, isn't it?
But, you've got to also just step back and say it's what's happening to that person that day. I remember I sent a script to an actor who I suspect drinks a little bit. I'm just going to put that out. Not going to say who it is. And so I got 2 emails back that morning. One was the impressions based on the first read, and the other was the impressions based on the second read. And the first read one was a damning stream of consciousness. This is terrible. What are you doing? This is all cliched. And, that twist came out like dog's bollocks. It was really obvious. Remember that line about dog's bollocks because it stays with you. And then the second email, which was, I think, more reflective and possibly more sober, said, I've read it a second time and I think this is actually a beautiful piece of writing and it's really reflective and I can see that these aren't cliches. These are resonances with other works and etc., etc. So I had both emails in the morning, and I just went, oh, okay, well, the nice one came in second, so
I'll take that.
I'll take that one. But that makes you think a lot of this does come down to that person that day, I think.
Well, we know that with ourselves,
Yeah.
right? Like you think about in casually, I mean, this is what social media has done, is it lets you do it on the fly publicly. But privately, you might say horrible things about a TV show or some music or a book or whatever that you wouldn't necessarily put out there. But these days, people do just tweet it or put it on Goodreads or give you a 1-star review or a no-star review and say the most horrendous things. I just try not to read them.
Well, that's right. But then some people will write a review on their blog or on Goodreads and put it on Twitter and tag you in the Twitter. So you'll think, there's a review, I better have a look at it. And it's like a 0-star, this works. And think, why? Why did you just ruin my day? Thanks a lot.
The ones I do listen to are probably about representation. Like if they call you out on something and you kind of go, oh, yeah, actually I hadn't thought of that. I'll take that one on board. I'll do that one better next time.
Yeah,
and also there are times when you know you haven't done your best, where you know maybe your plot is a bit saggy here or your character's a bit one-dimensional there.
And sometimes you just think, I'll wear that, and that can come from editors as well.
Because if you don't take criticism, you'll never get better.
You'll never get better.
Learn.
You can't be someone who just says, I'm not listening. That you can't be that person. I noticed I think it's one of your commandments, Sean, was you've got to listen. And Joss Whedon, I think it was, had some commandments as well. And one was listen, and another one was don't listen, which I thought was great, because there's a time, there is absolutely a time where you shouldn't, and there's a time when you should. Have you ever, you don't have to answer this, of course, don't have to answer anything I ask you people, but have you ever had personal hate mail? Oh, silent. Very, very heavy silence following that question.
Well, I'm waiting for Amy to answer, because Amy's a woman, so I'm assuming that she gets tons of horrible email all the time.
I actually, not emails. Emails, not so much. I had a horrible stalky story that I won't necessarily share here that was awful, but I have had, like, on social media, if like a publisher posts a picture of you, people just say rude things like, why is she wearing that lipstick? Or it's like lipstick on a pig, or that kind of stuff. But not much. I haven't had much. I'm not that famous. So.
Wow.
I've had some criticism, particularly for Star Wars novels. There's
such a passionate fan base. Yeah.
Oh yeah, 99% of Star Wars fans are really great, but there are a couple. Just like in any organisation, there are a couple of people who are perhaps not very well, or perhaps overinvested or whatever, and they'll let you know exactly what they think. And you might have 1,000 fans like that, and only one out of those will be horrible. But it's unfortunately you remember the horrible one. The one that freaks you out.
Yeah,
I try to remember the good ones. The guys who send in their headshots and say, "Oh, I'd love to be a Jedi. Here's my imagined Jedi name, and here's my photo, so you can use me as the model for a character." And you go,
see, I love.
That's kind of beautiful.
I love getting the fan mail. The emails are usually like from people who love your work, who've taken the effort to sit down. But there have been people online who just, for whatever reason, fixate on you, probably for their own health reasons or whatever's going on with them, but they just take against you and write horrible things about you. I really hate it in your professional life. It's not fun. If they're contacting other people on Facebook that or I've had that happen.
Yes. Yeah.
That's awful. I had a guy once email me to say, I've just read the latest book of your Astropolis series. I didn't like the first two, but I read the third one. And I go, thanks for buying the book. That's great. I don't care if you like them. Thanks for the sales. And he said, I found your savage attack on the Catholic Church to be completely unacceptable. I will no longer be reading any of your books. And I was thinking, what attack is this? I mean, I'm an atheist, and I have been prone in private to stick the boot in every now and again, but I don't remember doing it in books. And I actually did a word search through the manuscript of the third one to find out what he was talking about, and there was some passing reference to the church being irrelevant in the year 1 million AD, And,
I would call that a safe bet.
A fairly safe bet, but he did not approve at all and did not like it, and that's okay. He was probably a man of faith who felt challenged by it, and he doesn't have to read my books. Hopefully he's still buying them.
I like it when
that would be really
when
good.
People buy things to burn them. It's always my favourite when you have these mass protests, like the one about coffee makers, when all the Republicans in the US they didn't like the coffee makers, so they bought them to smash them. And I thought, well done. Well done, guys.
Isn't it? I've always wanted to have a book on the banned books list in America, because that guarantees extra sales. And Garth has one. Garth has a book, the name of which I've forgotten. It'll come to me midway through the next episode, probably. But he uses the word shit on the first page, and it's just he's talking about bird shit. And that's enough to get on the banned books list. And I was thinking,
really?
I could do that. I could do
Got
that.
on the banned books list. Wow. I think religion is obviously a hot button one. I mentioned it before, but I wrote a play that's unpublished, but it was kind of controversial at the time. It was about
your plays are so potent, Alex, that they change the future and are controversial without even being amazing.
It was called Molly's Shoes. I don't really like the title, but we spent ages trying to come up with one. And it's just about a young couple who get together at uni, and one is quite an outspoken atheist, and the male half of the couple, character called David, ends up becoming sort of accidentally a born-again Christian. He gets there through kind of intelligent design, and that's how he gets there. And Molly is their physics lecturer, played by the wonderful Bridget Walters, who was probably in her 70s at the time and was magical. Anyway, the initial draft, everyone went, oh, this female character, Elspeth, she's such a hardcore atheist. She's obviously you. She sounds just like you, and she's winning every argument. That was the issue in the first draft. And I went, yeah, that's a fair cop. She is actually winning every argument. So I have to try and make this as much as possible a kind of 50-50 unwinnable situation, because it's actually not about whether atheism or Christianity wins. It's actually just about the fact that they can't empathize. This couple who really love each other fall apart because they can't reconcile these two perspectives, and that was the point. And at the very, very end of the play, they actually started to see each other's perspectives, but by that point it's 20 years too late and it's all over. That's the idea. And a lot of the handwritten letters that I received were about the fact that neither Christianity nor atheism won, therefore each side saw it as a loss. So you'd get the sort of comments you just described, how dare you attack the church, blah, blah, blah. But also atheists going, what are you pro this, pro that? You know, are you pro-feminist? Are you pro... You know, so I did an interview at the time where I said I've been called in this past week pro-feminist, anti-feminist, pro-abortion, anti-abortion, pro-Christian, anti-Christian. And the whole point is the play is weaving between those two things. But the other thing was that some of the critical reviews decided, because the male character was the Christian, that had to be me. And therefore I was obviously a conservative pushing an agenda. And that's quite a hard thing to process, because you're like, no, the whole point was the first draft was too, the girl was winning, and I was told to redraft that, and now have I gone too far the other way, and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, long story short, I went to Port Elliot and got away from the whole thing.
Except I notice now that you are pushing the Sith barrow. You're bringing up Palpatine so often that it's clear that you're a conservative.
I am clearly pro-Sith. Yeah, but then what's interesting, though, is what Caleb, one of my writer friends, goes, isn't that what you set out to do? And I went, yeah, I think it was, but that doesn't mean you're happy when it happens.
Well, I guess one thing that we haven't touched on is, because we're all going, oh, it's fine, you ignore it, but you have to learn to get there, right?
Yes.
Like, you have to learn resilience, because when you first, let's go back to before publication, when you first start showing work to people, you have to build up that skin. Like, you see it in workshops with students. Like, one of the things we're really teaching at undergraduate level is how to take feedback and criticism.
And how to give feedback.
Yeah, without it being about your talent, your intelligence, your abilities, with it just being about those words on a page, not about you.
Yep.
So have you got any advice on that?
Well, I'll just say that, yes, you're absolutely right. It takes a long time for your skin to grow thick enough. But it's also about accepting positive criticism as well as negative criticism.
Oh, see, I still struggle with that.
Yeah, I don't do that well.
Struggle to say thank you.
Yeah, don't do that well.
I think as Australians too, like, I think Lisa Bennett, our colleague, said this to me when I first met her. She's like, you Australian, because she's Canadian. She's like, you Australians are so weird the way you don't tell people about your successes. Like, and she has a great way of being able to do it without seeming like a dick. Whereas when I do it, I feel like I'm being, because we're Australian, it's like, I can't be telling people that. They're going to think I'm a total tool bag.
Yeah, I think it is a fear. And I find, I just go I either change the subject or go weirdly silent when people say good things. Someone was giving me feedback on something on the phone, and I realised I'd made them incredibly uncomfortable because they'd said something quite lovely, and I'd given them nothing back, and it was just this kind of like lingering ... until finally.
But they do matter, don't you? You remember them, like you do remember the nice things. You kind of store them away for later to think about.
But also,
in those days where you're feeling rubbish.
If someone engages really strongly at a critical level, the fact that they're even engaging at all is a massive thing. Like if someone comes to the table and goes, hey, I've got some thoughts about your novel, or I've got some thoughts about your play or screenplay, that means they're there with you, and that takes a certain amount of investment that shouldn't be taken for granted. Because if someone really doesn't care, then they won't bother saying anything, right?
I have to admit, one of the most moving things for me when I started publishing was hearing from complete strangers. Just that thing of like some complete stranger out there in the world. And then when you start publishing outside of Australia, having someone from, I don't know, Georgia or wherever write to you, and you're just like, that's so weird that someone over there is reading this stuff, but then that they're reaching out to me and that we've kind of connected over this thing that I did is really moving.
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of giving feedback, I think the best kind of feedback that I've ever received is from script editors or dramaturgs who just ask questions. And you can actually be quite critical in the form of a question, because the question implies that something's missing or something's unclear. But it's actually really great.
Do you realise that your work is complete shit? No? What? Hey?
Was that an ending?
Yeah.
That where it ends.
That's...
You call yourself a writer?
But
do you think you're wasting your talent?
Do you think you're wasting everyone's time? But I had...
Do you think you have any talent?
I had a good one where someone said, what happened before this scene? And I went into this whole thing, and I realised that, oh shit, I wasn't showing, it was all in my head. But I was, what happened before this scene? Well, the answer was actually this character had robbed a house. That wasn't really clear. And I was like, oh yeah, she robbed a house and she's coming back. And the person I was working with went, do you think maybe we'd like to see that scene? That might be information. And that was a really kind way of, the other way of doing that is like, what the hell's wrong with you? Why don't we know what's going on? But by coaxing you there with questions, it lets you feel that you still have agency, I suppose.
And that's really common. Like you see it in students, but also our work. Like when you send it off to editors, that's one of the most common criticisms is you left the drama off the page. Like put it on the page.
Absolutely.
Yep.
So what's the...
We're all thinking about
we're all going back.
We are thinking about criticism.
Yeah.
It's going
back
terrifying.
into the past. I got hate mail for the rock musical too, which I didn't expect. I was quite shocked. That one came to uni, a handwritten letter from, I assume, a parent who hadn't actually seen the show but had just taken exception to the marketing campaign because the villain in Once Upon a Midnight is a fairy godmother. And you know what? Shrek did it around about the same time, so I don't know why it was such a controversial thing. But she said, how dare you? Because children should know that their spiritual reality is that elves, fairies, and salamanders are their guides through this life. And I had to look up salamanders, and I realised that there is a lot of burning salamander imagery. And then she went through the Japanese monsters and went, I don't know what these things are, but they sound offensive. And I was like, wow. And that sort of thing you laugh at. You have to.
I've got a good story. In End of the Night Girl, there's quite a bit of swearing. There's the C word used quite a lot.
Oh, the C word. The C word's a big one.
I actually have 2 funny stories about the C word in this book. But in this one, I was invited to go and do an author's talk.
And you dropped the C-bomb.
No, to a literary group, and they were all over 70. And it was a dinner. I had to go sit with the publisher at the dinner and he's like, I just don't know how, because they're all buying the book, right, at the event.
No.
And he's like, I'm just not sure how they're going to go with the opening. And then the woman who introduces me and I do my talk, and then the first question I get was, what led you to write about horticulture And then the woman the host stood up and went, no, Holocaust.
Oh.
Holocaust. They were all deaf.
Oh,
they were all deaf. None of them knew what I'd said.
Oh, no.
And I sat down and the publisher said, I can only imagine what she thinks when she starts reading it.
No. Rose is a very different 4-letter word. I love it.
That's kind of beautiful, though, isn't it?
So what's the other story?
Oh, the other one is about Johnny, and his mum's listening to these, so she's probably going to hear it and know my side of the story now.
Well, the time has come.
When we first started dating, so they're quite conservative in a really nice way, but quite conservative, and there's no swearing or any of that stuff. So I'd been like on my best behaviour, and it's only like the third time I've met her. And I was giving an author talk at a writers' festival, and he invited his mother along, and we get all the way through, and he just sort of made the joke beforehand, don't read any of the bits with the C word in it. And I was like, yeah, I'm not doing that anyway at a writers' festival. Anyway, we get through the event, she comes, she buys a book, we talk, and then she leaves. And I turn around and I'm talking to Johnny, and I just went, oh, thank God I didn't say C-U-N-T in front of her. And I said it aloud. And he's like smirking his head off. And he's like, turn around.
Oh,
and he'd been watching her. And then he said later he baited me into saying it. He'd steered the conversation there because he could see her walking back towards us, so that I'm like braying the word out while she's standing behind me.
Excellent. So, Johnny, very
That's
good. Very
fantastic.
good.
Well done, Johnny. So the highest form of compliment, you might say, the best possible review you could have for your work is to be on the receiving end of a stalking relationship. Have either of you ever had that in your professional life?
2. I've had it twice.
Oh,
Yeah.
yuck. Oh, harrowing. I shouldn't even make light of it.
One
Sorry.
was really bad. One had the federal police involved.
Oh, you're kidding.
And it was horrible. Yeah, it was really bad.
Oh, I'm glad you're okay.
Yeah, me too. It was a
Yeah.
while ago now. It was a while ago. And the other one was just petty. And this person used to call my place of work and tell them they should sack me and all this stuff.
Based on something you'd written.
No, based on hating my publisher. It wasn't even about me.
Oh, wow.
And they targeted all my publisher's authors.
That's a very busy
Yeah.
person.
That went to court too.
Oh, I'm sorry that happened to you, Amy. That's
Yeah,
terrible.
it's good fun.
What about you,
Yeah,
Alex?
they was talking about it.
Oh, we'll shift the attention onto Alex. Alex,
Alex.
how many crazed Japanese monster fans have stalked you down the years?
Luckily, they went for other people, so that was okay. Yeah, look, I've had students who've wanted to be more than students and have become very good at making that line much clearer. I think when I first started teaching, I was just trying to be lovely all the time, and I've since learnt that you actually have to be very clear about what that line is. And
See, I think women are often a bit better trained at that. Like, so I just have always had that very professional barrier down at teaching. But I remember saying this to a young male tutor that I employed once, that this is something to be aware
Yes.
of. That I think men, particularly in arts degrees as tutors, that a lot of crushes happen, and you have to have those very strong boundaries very early on.
But then I said something to a student not that long ago where I said, when you graduate, we will be friends. And I didn't mean that in a cruel way, but then it came out of my mouth sounding...
Or a creepy way.
Yeah, or a creepy way. Well, she said something like, she introduced me as a friend or something. And I said, when you graduate, we'll be friends. But right now, I said something stupidly clinical, probably. And it's a little bit...
That's important.
It is important.
I think it's important.
It's important to make those barriers clear, but...
Because the power relationship is so stark.
It's so stark. And they don't always understand that they're, I had one that was emailing me every hour going, ring me, here's my number, ring me, here's my number. And so I didn't notice on a Sunday afternoon. I didn't have emails going to my phone then at that point, thank God. But I opened my email box on my laptop and there was like 30 or more of these emails, and I just went, and luckily I escalated it to the topic coordinator and said, I'm not even going to respond to this person now. This has gotten too weird.
Wow.
And so there's been a lot of things. Like that.
See, I think teaching gets more of a grey area than writing. Like, I've probably had more personal attacks as a teacher than as a writer.
Oh, that's hard. That's awful.
But not very many, just over many, many years. You get one every few years, maybe.
Yeah.
How about you, Sean? Have you had stalkers?
I've had a couple of people who sort of latched on and were hard to kind of, nothing scary, nothing too scary, nothing that went to the federal police, for instance, or went to court. But
I'm going to try and call you less often.
I noticed that while we've been talking today, you've already sent me 5 emails. Send chocolate, send chocolate, send chocolate. I think partly because I operate in a world where isolation is the norm. So there are a lot of science fiction people who aren't very good at coming out of the cave, and I in fact am one of them. So I don't belong to science fiction clubs or that kind of thing, but I do go to conventions, and I think everyone's very polite and very friendly in those environments because it's not our normal environment. I mean, we love seeing people, but it's not what we normally do. And
I think all writers are like that. I think when you go to writing conventions, people are very extroverted because normally they're in their room.
Yeah. That's right. But I've never had anybody sort of waiting outside my bedroom window with a pair of binoculars or anything like that, partly for the obvious reason that why would you want to see that, you know? But I count myself very fortunate. I mean, I have friends who have had really strange relationships with fans. And I often think about Philip K. Dick, some of the weird people he had hanging around, you know, sniffing around his crazy life. You know. Some people are just mad people magnets, and he was certainly
it's funny,
one of them.
When you see the very, very famous authors, they're very careful to stay very professional and cool, I've noticed. Like, they'll be nice, but they will not cross the friendly boundary too far, because I think you just invite it in. Like, because there is a boundary between you as a personal human and you as a public person. It's true with teaching too. You said it in the last episode, I think, Alex, about performing as a lecturer is very different from talking here.
Yes, absolutely. And, you know, I see it with a lot of active friends as well, some of whom are quite successful and in the public eye, and they have a kind of invisible wall that comes up in certain situations. You know, if you're on set with someone who's quite famous, I mean, often extras get really angry and go, oh, that person's so cold. And you go, look, they said good morning, they smiled. That's all we should expect from that person. Also, it's their place of work. Don't forget that. But you know, they're not supposed to be your best friend. That would be unusual. And I'm always.
But the other thing is I was just going to say on that, the volume of people that you would have to do it to.
Yes, absolutely.
When you're the one person. So when Sean, you go to a convention.
Or when I go to Skywalker Ranch and they tell me there's George sitting over there, don't say hello to George because 200 new people come through here every day. He doesn't have time to talk to them all.
No, and that's fair, you know. I get a little bit suspicious, not suspicious, that's too strong, a little bit concerned within the teaching profession when there are teachers who do try a little too hard to be buddy with students. I think that can be unhealthy for both the teacher and the student, and that's not to say you should be cold, that's not to say you should be cruel, but I think there is a certain line that should be in place for everyone.
For them as much as us,
Well, the time has come for me to draw the line between us. This is an extra long episode. It's time for us to go to our separate houses and exist in I keep saying socialization instead of social isolation. It's the opposite. I know, but that's it, because I think socialization is the problem. I'm loving social isolation. Until we meet online again, it's been a pleasure as always.
Take care.
Stay safe.
Why don't you write when you don't need money? All your notes sound alike too much. All of them start with I love you, honey, but they end with the same old touch. Just for a change, send a nice loving letter and cut out that please remit. Why don't you write when you don't need money, honey? That would certainly make a hit.
Don't stalk us.
Don't email.
Don't contact me under any circumstances.
Please do. That's what our socials are for. Please get in touch with us.
Please do get in touch on social media.
Ask us questions. We're here for you, dear listener.
We absolutely are.
Sometimes.
We absolutely are.
Within limits.
Until next time, farewell.
Bye.
Bye.
Hi, Jeremy Cordeaux in the Court of Public Opinion. I'm just on air here to let you know that we'll be live streaming the Court of Public Opinion every Friday between 9 o'clock and 12 on jeremycordeaux.com. Please join us. We'd love to have you.